When the Galactic Council first received humanity's military designation request, they laughed. These primitive bipeds from a backwater planet wanted to classify their entire species as special forces. The arrogance was stunning. Every civilized race had soldiers, but only the most elite warriors earned such titles after decades of training and genetic enhancement. The laughter stopped when humans arrived at the first interstellar conflict. What the galaxy discovered wasn't just another warrior race. It was something far more terrifying, a species that had spent 50,000 years turning their entire planet into a training ground for warfare. While other civilizations developed peaceful societies and created specialized military castes, humans had done something unthinkable. They had made every single member of their species a potential weapon. From their children's games that simulated combat scenarios to their entertainment that glorified tactical thinking, from their sports that celebrated controlled violence to their art that immortalized conflict, everything about human culture was designed to produce fighters. They didn't have special forces because they didn't need them. They were special forces. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's most terrifying predators had never been the tigers, sharks, or bears that other species feared. The most dangerous predator on Earth had always been another human. And now, for the first time in galactic history, all of humanity was looking outward. The communications array on Luna Station crackled to life at exactly 14:23 Greenwich Mean Time on what would later be remembered as Contact Day. Sarah Chun, the duty officer monitoring deep space frequencies, nearly spilled her coffee when the impossible happened. A structured signal emerged from the cosmic background noise, carrying patterns too complex and deliberate to be natural phenomena. "This is impossible," she whispered, her hands trembling as she adjusted the receivers. The signal wasn't coming from any known human source. It originated from a point in space 47 light-years away, in the direction of the TRAPPIST system. The mathematical progressions embedded in the transmission were elegant, sophisticated, and definitely artificial. Within hours, every major government on Earth had been notified. The message was simple when finally decoded: an invitation to join something called the Galactic Council, along with basic technological specifications for faster-than-light communication and travel. The aliens, for that's what they had to be, had been watching humanity and decided they were ready for contact. Dr. James Morrison, Earth's lead xenolinguist, stood before the assembled United Nations Emergency Council 3 days later. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of excitement and barely contained anxiety. The linguistic patterns suggest a highly advanced civilization with at least 3 distinct species contributing to the message structure. They're offering us membership in some kind of interstellar organization, but there are conditions. President Helena Vasquez leaned forward. What kind of conditions? Morrison adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit that had become more pronounced since the contact. We need to demonstrate what they call galactic readiness. According to their cultural briefing packet, this involves showing that we can contribute meaningfully to what they term universal peace and prosperity. They've included a testing protocol. General Marcus Webb, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, studied the translated documents with a soldier's eye for detail. Something about the phrasing bothered him, but he couldn't quite identify what. What exactly does this test involve? Combat simulation Morrison replied. Apparently, every species that joins the Council must prove they can contribute to galactic defense. They've identified a series of scenarios where new members demonstrate their military capabilities against computer-generated threats. The room fell silent. Humanity had spent the last century moving away from large-scale conflicts, focusing instead on exploration, scientific advancement, and cultural development. The idea that an advanced galactic civilization still required military prowess seemed almost primitive. Dr. Elena Kozlov, director of the European Space Consortium, voiced what many were thinking. Are we certain these beings are as advanced as they claim? This obsession with military testing seems remarkably backward for a peaceful galactic organization. Morrison nodded. I had the same concern, but Their technological demonstrations are undeniable. They've shown us glimpses of technology that's centuries ahead of our current capabilities. The combat requirements appear to be a practical necessity. According to their briefing materials, the galaxy contains several hostile species that regularly threaten peaceful civilizations. General Webb studied the tactical requirements more carefully. The scenarios seemed straightforward: space-based combat simulations against AI-controlled enemies, ground-based tactical operations, and something called asymmetric warfare evaluations. What struck him as odd wasn't the content, but the complexity. These weren't simple tests of courage or basic military competence. They were sophisticated evaluations that would challenge even Earth's most elite special forces units. "How long do we have to prepare?" President Vasquez asked. 6 months, Morrison replied. "They're sending a representative to oversee the testing. A ship will arrive in Earth orbit in approximately 180 days. The months that followed transformed human civilization in ways no one had anticipated. The promise of galactic membership had united the planet in a way that no previous event had managed. Old rivalries were set aside as humanity focused on a single goal: passing the galactic readiness test. But something unexpected happened during the preparation phase. As military planners from every nation gathered to design training programs for the test scenarios, they began to realize something profound about their own species. The skills required for the galactic assessment weren't just present in elite military units. They were distributed throughout human society in ways that seemed almost designed for this moment. Colonel Maria Santos, a Brazilian Special Forces veteran tasked with coordinating the international training program, made the first significant observation. "We're approaching this wrong," she told the assembled military leaders during a planning session in Geneva. "We keep thinking we need to select and train a small group of elite candidates, but look at these scenarios more carefully." She projected the alien test requirements onto the wall. Asymmetric warfare, environmental adaptation, resource scarcity management, creative problem-solving under extreme stress, psychological resistance to terror tactics. These aren't just military skills, they're survival skills that every human culture has developed in some form. General Wei Lin from the Chinese People's Liberation Army studied the scenarios with fresh eyes. "She's right. My grandmother survived the Japanese occupation using tactics that match these advanced asymmetric warfare requirements. She wasn't a soldier, just a farmer protecting her family." Dr. Amara Okafor, a military psychologist from Nigeria, added her own perspective. "The psychological profiles they're looking for: adaptability, aggression tempered by strategic thinking, the ability to form rapid social bonds under stress. These are basic human characteristics that we see in everything from our sports to our business practices." As the training programs developed, a strange pattern emerged. The humans who excelled in the scenarios weren't necessarily career soldiers. A mountain rescue specialist from Colorado demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking in low-gravity combat simulations. A street artist from Sao Paulo showed remarkable aptitude for urban warfare scenarios. A marine biologist from Australia adapted to alien environment simulations faster than veteran special forces operators. Dr. Amanda Foster, an anthropologist studying the training process, began to document what she was seeing. "We're not just good at these scenarios," she told Morrison during one of their regular briefings. "We're naturally suited to them in ways that seem almost impossible. It's as if our entire evolutionary history has been preparing us for exactly this type of challenge." Morrison had been having similar thoughts, but Foster's systematic observations forced him to confront an uncomfortable possibility. "You're suggesting this isn't a coincidence?" "I'm suggesting that what the aliens call special forces capabilities might just be normal human behavior," Foster replied. "Think about it. We're the only species on our planet that colonized every environment, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to high-altitude mountains. We did it without genetic modification or advanced technology, just adaptability and stubbornness." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Luna Station. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the secure link, tight with tension. Dr. Morrison, you need to see this. We've received another transmission from the Galactic Council. It's addressed specifically to Earth's military command. The message was brief, but troubling. The Galactic representative ship had encountered what they called a Class 7 hostile incursion en route to Earth. They were requesting immediate assistance from any combat-capable Earth vessels to help deal with the threat. The message included coordinates and tactical data about an alien force that had attacked 3 different star systems in the past month. General Webb stared at the message in disbelief. They want us to help them? We haven't even taken their test yet. We don't have faster-than-light capability. How could we possibly assist with an interstellar military operation? Morrison was equally confused, but Dr. Foster was studying the tactical data with growing excitement. Look at the patterns, she said, highlighting sections of the alien threat assessment. The hostile force uses swarm tactics, hit-and-run strategies, and psychological warfare. According to this data, they've defeated every galactic military force sent against them because they don't fight the way civilized species expect. What are you suggesting? Webb asked. Foster smiled grimly. I'm suggesting they sound exactly like us. The realization hit Morrison like a physical blow. The Galactic Readiness Test wasn't designed to evaluate whether humans could contribute to galactic defense. It was designed to evaluate whether humanity was the solution to a military problem the entire galaxy had been unable to solve. Over the next 48 hours, as emergency conferences were held and hasty preparations made, the scope of the situation became clear. The Galactic Council represented over 200 different species, most of them highly advanced technological civilizations. They had been fighting the hostile force, known as the Devourers, for over 50 years with minimal success. The Devourers didn't use advanced technology or sophisticated tactics. They used something far more effective: pure, relentless aggression combined with an absolute willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. They attacked without warning, showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and seemed to view warfare not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. They're space barbarians, explained Zax Theory, the Galactic Council representative, during an emergency video conference from his approaching ship. His translation software rendered his complex alien speech into precise, if oddly formal, English. Every civilized species has moved beyond such primitive approaches to conflict. We wage war with calculated precision, following established protocols and maintaining ethical boundaries. The Devourers follow no rules and recognize no limits. President Vasquez asked the obvious question: what makes you think humanity can help where your advanced civilizations have failed? Zax Theory's response would be remembered as the moment everything changed. Your preliminary cultural analysis reveals something unprecedented. Your species appears to have retained and refined primitive warfare capabilities while simultaneously developing advanced technological and social systems. You are, in essence, civilized barbarians, precisely what we need to counter the Devourer threat. The silence in the conference room stretched for long seconds before General Webb began to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. Civilized barbarians, he repeated. They're not testing whether we're ready to join a peaceful galactic community. They're recruiting us to be their attack dogs. Morrison felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. That's why the test scenarios focused so heavily on exactly the kind of warfare that civilized species would find distasteful. They need someone willing to fight dirty. Dr. Foster was furiously taking notes, her anthropologist training recognizing the historical parallels. It's the Roman Empire all over again. Advanced civilization encountering aggressive nomadic tribes and realizing they need equally aggressive allies to survive. The next few weeks transformed humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. As more intelligence about the galactic situation became available, it became clear that the Devourers were winning not because they were more technologically advanced, but because they were more psychologically adapted to total warfare. They didn't just want to conquer territory or resources. They wanted to break their enemies completely. The Galactic Council species, for all their technological advancement, had evolved beyond such savage approaches to conflict. Their militaries were highly professional, their tactics were sophisticated, and their wars were conducted with rules and limitations that maintained social order. They were facing an enemy that recognized no such constraints, and they were losing badly. Humanity, on the other hand, had spent its entire history fighting exactly that kind of enemy, itself. We're natural asymmetric warfare specialists, Colonel Santos observed during one of the strategy sessions. Every human culture has faced enemies who wouldn't fight fair, wouldn't follow rules, and wouldn't stop until they were completely destroyed. We've been developing counter-barbarian tactics for 50,000 years. General Webb studied the latest intelligence reports about devourer tactics with professional interest. Scorched earth policies, targeting civilian infrastructure, psychological terror campaigns, suicide attacks. We've seen all of this before. Multiple times. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't being invited to join a peaceful galactic community. They were being recruited as the galaxy's special forces. The species called in when civilized approaches to warfare weren't sufficient. Dr. Morrison spent his days translating increasingly urgent messages from various Galactic Council species, all requesting immediate human assistance with devourer incursions. The pattern was always the same. Conventional galactic military forces would engage the devourers, follow established tactical protocols, and be systematically destroyed by enemies who ignored all the rules of civilized warfare. They need us because we're as barbaric as their enemies, Morrison summarized during a briefing to world leaders. But unlike the devourers, we can turn our savagery on and off. We can be barbarians when necessary and civilized when appropriate. President Vasquez stared at the translated requests for assistance. 17 different star systems were under devourer attack. Millions of alien civilians were dying while their militaries proved inadequate against enemies who fought with prehistoric ruthlessness. How do we even reach these locations? We still don't have faster-than-light travel. The answer came from an unexpected source. Zax Theory's ship entered Earth orbit 3 days ahead of schedule, carrying what he described as emergency military assistance packages. The technology transfers included not just faster-than-light drives, but also advanced weapons systems, tactical communications equipment, and something called cultural adaptation interfaces that would allow humans to operate effectively in alien environments. The Council has authorized unprecedented technology sharing, Zax Theory explained during his first face-to-face meeting with human leaders. His appearance was unsettling, tall, insectoid, with compound eyes that seemed to track movement in ways that made humans uncomfortable. The devourer threat requires immediate action. Formal testing protocols are being suspended in favor of immediate deployment. General Webb found the situation both exhilarating and deeply troubling. You're essentially arming a species you've never properly evaluated and asking them to solve your worst military crisis. That seems remarkably desperate. Zax Theory's mandibles clicked in what the translation software indicated was agreement. Desperation is an accurate assessment. The Devourers have begun targeting Council core worlds. Our most advanced civilizations are proving incapable of mounting effective resistance. Your species represents our final strategic option. The weight of galactic civilization's survival resting on humanity's shoulders was sobering, but what truly shocked the human leadership was what came next. As detailed tactical briefings were shared, it became clear that the galaxy's military thinking was not just ineffective against the Devourers. It was actively counterproductive. They're fighting with honor, Colonel Santos observed after reviewing engagement records. Protecting civilians, avoiding collateral damage, following rules of engagement. Against an enemy that specifically targets civilians, maximizes collateral damage, and follows no rules whatsoever. Dr. Foster was documenting the cultural clash with academic fascination. It's a fundamental mismatch of warfare paradigms. The galactic species wage war like chess players, strategic, calculated, rule-bound. The Devourers fight like rabid animals, savage, relentless, and utterly without constraint. Morrison studied the tactical data with growing understanding. And we fight like both, depending on what the situation requires. We can play chess when it's appropriate, and become rabid animals when that's what survival demands. The first human military volunteers were selected not from traditional special forces units, but from a bizarre cross-section of society that reflected humanity's unique adaptation to total warfare. Mountain rescue specialists, extreme sports athletes, video game champions, street fighters, survival experts, and, yes, traditional soldiers, all united by a common ability to thrive in situations where normal rules didn't apply. As the volunteer force prepared for deployment to their first engagement zone, President Vasquez addressed them with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. You're not just representing humanity today. You're representing the possibility that civilized species can survive in a universe that sometimes demands uncivilized solutions. Show them what humans do when the galaxy needs us to be special forces. The volunteers departed Earth aboard Galactic Council ships, carrying human weapons alongside alien technology, trained in tactics that blended prehistoric savagery with advanced strategy. They were heading toward a battle that would determine not just their own fate, but the survival of galactic civilization itself. Behind them, Earth prepared for what everyone knew was coming next. If this first deployment was successful, humanity would become the galaxy's permanent special forces, the species called in when civilized approaches to warfare weren't enough. The implications were staggering, both for human society and for their place in the galactic community. The age of human innocence was over. The age of humanity as the galaxy's weapon of last resort had begun. The Kepler 442 system had been a thriving hub of galactic commerce until the Devourers arrived. 3 inhabited worlds, 14 mining stations, and a population of nearly 40 million beings from 12 different species had made it one of the Council's most prosperous border regions. That was before the systematic annihilation began. Captain Sarah Ghost Chun, no relation to the Luna Station communications officer who had first detected the galactic transmission, stood in the cramped briefing room of the GCS Harmony's Edge, staring at tactical displays that showed the aftermath of 6 weeks of Devourer occupation. The images were worse than anything in Earth's military databases, and that was saying something. They're not just killing, reported Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, the mission's intelligence officer. They're systematically destroying everything that makes a civilization function. Infrastructure, cultural sites, educational facilities, medical centers. It's like they want to erase the very concept of organized society. The human force assigned to Kepler 442 was small by Earth standards, just 250 volunteers drawn from backgrounds that would have seemed bizarre to traditional military planners. Chun herself was a former extreme mountaineer who had joined military special forces only after civilian life proved insufficiently challenging. Her second in command was Marcus Williams, a former Detroit street medic who had learned tactical medicine in urban war zones before they were officially recognized as war zones. Alongside them were programmers who had cut their teeth on competitive gaming, survival instructors who trained corporate executives, underground fighters who had never seen formal military training, and a surprising number of people whose primary qualification was simply that they thrived in situations where normal social rules didn't apply. The Galactic Forces tried a conventional liberation approach, explained Zeth Kree, the Altarian tactical advisor assigned to the human unit. His species resembled elongated dolphins with manipulator appendages, and his translated voice carried undertones of bitter experience. 3 separate assault fleets, total numerical superiority, advanced technology, all defeated within days. Chun studied the engagement records with professional interest. The pattern was dismally familiar from historical conflicts on Earth. They fought like they were facing another civilized military force. Formation attacks, clear objectives, rules of engagement designed to minimize civilian casualties. Precisely, Zeth Kree confirmed. The Devourers responded by using civilians as human shields, attacking medical facilities, and implementing terror tactics that violated every accepted principle of warfare. Our forces were psychologically unprepared for such savagery. Williams was examining the current intelligence on Devourer positions with the eye of someone who had grown up in urban environments where violence was a constant possibility. They're not holding territory in any traditional sense. They're maintaining presence in ways designed to maximize psychological impact on any rescue attempt. The briefing continued for hours, but Chun was already forming tactical approaches that would have been impossible for galactic military forces to implement. The Devourers had made a critical error in their tactical planning. They had prepared to face civilized enemies who would be constrained by ethical considerations and conventional military doctrine. They had not prepared to face humans. "Here's what we're going to do," Chen announced after the formal briefing concluded. "We're going to fight dirty." The first phase of the human approach would have horrified galactic military observers, if any had been present. Rather than attempting a direct assault on Devourer positions, the human force split into dozens of small units and began infiltrating the occupied system using tactics borrowed from guerrilla warfare, urban insurgency, and criminal enterprises. Sergeant Rita Gonzalez, a former Los Angeles gang mediator, led a unit that included 2 hackers, a demolitions expert who had learned his trade in illegal mining operations, and 3 individuals whose official records were so heavily classified that even Shin didn't know their real backgrounds. Their objective was simple: terrorize the terrorists. The Devourers expect their enemies to announce themselves, follow predictable attack patterns, and limit collateral damage, Gonzalez explained to her unit as they prepared to infiltrate the mining station Kepler 442. Mining 7. "We're going to do none of those things." The infiltration itself demonstrated the vast difference between human and galactic approaches to warfare. Where galactic forces would have announced their presence and demanded surrender according to established protocols, Gonzalez's team simply appeared in the station's lower levels like a nightmare made manifest. The first Devourer patrol to encounter them found equipment sabotaged in ways that suggested supernatural intervention. Life support systems that failed at exactly the wrong moments, gravity generators that created localized anomalies, and communication equipment that broadcast psychologically disturbing sounds at random intervals. When the Devourers tried to investigate, they found only empty corridors and the growing certainty that something was hunting them. "It's psychological warfare," explained Dr. Amanda Foster, who was monitoring the operation from the command ship. Her anthropological background made her uniquely qualified to understand what the human teams were accomplishing. The Devourers use terror as a tool, but they've never been subjected to it themselves. They don't know how to process being the hunted rather than the hunters. Meanwhile, Captain Chun was implementing the second phase of the human strategy on the main occupied world of Kepler 442b, where galactic forces had attempted to avoid civilian areas. Chen's teams deliberately operated from within population centers, using the Devourers' own terror tactics against them. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Devourers who had spent weeks terrorizing helpless civilians suddenly found themselves facing enemies who appeared without warning, struck without mercy, and disappeared before any response was possible. Worse, from the Devourer perspective, these new enemies seemed to actively enjoy the chaos they were creating. "They're adapting faster than our models predicted," reported Dr. Jennings, the mission's xenopsychologist, during one of the daily briefings. "The Devourers are showing signs of genuine fear for the first time in recorded galactic history." The turning point came during what became known as the Kepler Station incident. A group of Devourers had barricaded themselves in a civilian shelter, using approximately 300 hostages as leverage against any rescue attempt. Traditional galactic military doctrine would have required extended negotiations, careful planning to minimize casualties, and eventually either a precisely executed rescue operation or diplomatic resolution. Staff Sergeant Tommy Morrison, a former Chicago emergency responder who had earned his tactical training in situations where following standard procedures meant people died, approached the situation with characteristically human directness. He walked up to the main entrance of the facility and requested permission to speak with the Devourer commander. "I want to make you an offer," Morrison announced over the facility's communication system, speaking in the Pidgin Galactic language that had become standard for human operations. "Release the civilians, and I'll give you something better." The Devourer response was predictable: threats, demands for surrender, and graphic descriptions of what would happen to the hostages if human forces didn't withdraw immediately. Morrison's counteroffer changed galactic warfare forever. "Keep the hostages. I'll come inside unarmed and alone. You can do whatever you want of me, but here's the thing. I won't be alone for long. My friends are going to come looking for me, and they're really creative when they're angry." What followed was 3 hours of psychological warfare that broke every established protocol for hostage situations. Morrison allowed himself to be captured, tortured, and used as a propaganda tool, all while maintaining a conversational tone that suggested he was in complete control of the situation. More importantly, he provided a continuous stream of tactical intelligence to his teammates, while appearing to be helplessly at the mercy of his captors. The rescue operation that followed was swift, brutal, and completely successful. All 300 hostages were recovered alive. The Devourers were eliminated with efficiency that shocked even experienced human military observers. Morrison survived with injuries that would have been fatal without advanced galactic medical technology, and his first words upon regaining consciousness became legendary. "That was actually kind of fun." The broader strategic impact of the Kepler 442 operation was transformative. Within 6 weeks, human forces had not only liberated the entire system, but had done so in ways that fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood warfare. The Devourers, who had seemed unstoppable against civilized military forces, were systematically outmaneuvered, out-terrorized, and eventually eliminated by enemies who fought with even greater savagery, while somehow maintaining strategic coherence. "It's unprecedented," reported Zach's theory during his analysis briefing to the Galactic Council. "Human forces demonstrated tactical flexibility that exceeds our theoretical models. They adapted to enemy strategies in real time, implemented counter-terror operations that were more effective than the original terror campaigns, and maintained unit cohesion under conditions that would have destroyed conventional military formations." But the most significant discovery wasn't about human military capabilities, it was about human psychology. Dr. Foster's post-operation interviews revealed something that would reshape galactic understanding of warfare forever. "They enjoyed it," she reported to a stunned audience of galactic military leaders. "Not the killing specifically, but the challenge. The problem-solving under extreme stress, the adaptation to impossible conditions, the teamwork in life-or-death situations. For humans, this kind of conflict isn't just a necessary evil. It's a natural expression of their competitive and social instincts." The implications were staggering. Where galactic species saw warfare as an unfortunate necessity that should be minimized and contained, humans saw it as one of many environments where they could test their capabilities against ultimate challenges. They weren't just good at war. They were psychologically adapted to find fulfillment in it. General Webb, monitoring the operation from Earth, summarized the situation in terms that would echo through military academies across the galaxy. "We're not fighting for survival or conquest or ideology. We're fighting because someone set up the ultimate obstacle course and challenged us to beat it. The Devourers just happened to be part of the obstacle course." The second major engagement came at the Vega colonies, where a massive Devourer fleet had trapped the Galactic Relief Force in a siege that had lasted for 4 months. Traditional space combat doctrine suggested that breaking the siege would require a fleet at least 3 times the size of the besieging force, along with months of careful planning and preparation. Commander Elena Vasquez, daughter of the Earth president and a former competitive pilot who had transitioned to military service specifically for the galactic deployment, was given command of a human space combat unit consisting of 36 modified fighters and a support crew drawn primarily from the extreme sports and competitive gaming communities. Our tactical approach is going to be unconventional, Vasquez announced during the pre-engagement briefing. Her pilots represented the strangest military formation in galactic history. Former racing drivers, aerobatic performers, test pilots, video game champions, and a significant number of individuals whose primary qualification was that they treated high-speed navigation through three-dimensional obstacle courses as entertainment. The siege-breaking operation lasted 17 hours and became the subject of military study throughout the galaxy. Rather than attempting to match the Devourer fleet in conventional combat, the human pilots treated the entire engagement as an elaborate puzzle with deadly consequences. They used tactics borrowed from racing, aerobatics, and competitive gaming to achieve battlefield effects that conventional military thinking had deemed impossible. "They're not flying like military pilots," observed Captain Crixtal, the besieged Galactic Force commander, as he watched human fighters weave through Devourer formations with apparent disregard for established space combat doctrine. "They're flying like they're trying to set speed records while performing aerial demonstrations." The psychological impact on the Devourer forces was immediate and catastrophic. Their tactical planning had been based on facing enemies who would engage in predictable formation combat using established strategic principles. Instead, they found themselves trying to target fighters that moved like three-dimensional acrobats, appeared to actively seek out the most dangerous possible flight paths, and seemed to treat incoming weapons fire as navigation obstacles rather than lethal threats. More importantly, the human pilots demonstrated a level of tactical creativity that overwhelmed Devourer command structures. Where galactic military forces followed established procedures and responded to enemy actions according to predetermined protocols, the human pilots improvised constantly, implemented tactics that had never been used before, and adapted to changing battlefield conditions faster than enemy computers could track. The siege was broken when pilot officer Maria Santos, the daughter of the Brazilian colonel who had helped design the original human training program, managed to thread her fighter through the overlapping fire patterns of 6 Devourer heavy cruisers and plant a nuclear device directly inside the enemy flagship's main reactor core. The maneuver required flying through spaces that computer models indicated were physically impossible for any craft to traverse. "How did she do that?" asked Dr. Foster when she reviewed the tactical recordings. "Practice," replied Commander Vasquez simply. Maria spent her teenage years racing through canyon systems in Brazil, threading aircraft between rock formations that were sometimes less than 3 meters apart. She was just applying familiar skills to an unfamiliar environment. The broader strategic significance of the Vega colony victory was that it proved human unconventional warfare capabilities could be successfully applied to space combat as well as ground operations. More importantly, it demonstrated that human psychological adaptations to extreme challenge-seeking behavior made them naturally suited to tactics that conventional military thinking would consider suicidal. "They don't calculate acceptable risk the same way other species do," explained Dr. Jennings in his post-engagement analysis. Where galactic pilots see a maneuver with a 15% survival probability and reject it as too dangerous, human pilots see the same maneuver and ask how they can improve their odds. The third major engagement of the first deployment phase occurred at Tau Ceti, where Devourers had implemented what they called a total consumption strategy, systematically destroying everything that could support life while using the resident population as slave labor in the destruction process. The psychological torture was as devastating as the physical destruction, and conventional galactic forces had proven completely unable to cope with the tactical challenges. Colonel Marcus Williams, now commanding the Human Ground Forces component, approached the Tau Ceti situation with tactics borrowed from hostage rescue, urban warfare, and disaster relief operations. His force included former emergency responders, search and rescue specialists, urban paramedics, and a surprising number of people whose backgrounds involve functioning effectively in post-disaster environments. The Devourers are treating this as a systematic destruction operation, Williams explained to his unit commanders. But they're using methods that assume their enemies will be paralyzed by the scope of the humanitarian crisis. We're going to turn that assumption into their weakness. The human approach to Tau Ceti became a model for unconventional liberation operations throughout the galaxy. Rather than attempting to engage Devourer forces directly, human teams focused on rapid extraction and relocation of civilian populations while simultaneously implementing infrastructure disruption tactics that made continued Devourer occupation impossible. The operation combined tactical elements that no galactic military force had ever attempted to integrate: combat medicine under fire, civilian evacuation from active combat zones, guerrilla warfare in urban environments, and psychological operations designed to break enemy morale while maintaining civilian cooperation. "We're not trying to defeat them," Williams explained to the galactic observers who were documenting human tactical methods. "We're making their operational objectives impossible to achieve while giving them progressively more difficult problems to solve." The Tau Ceti liberation took 3 weeks and resulted in the successful evacuation of over 2 million civilians, the complete disruption of Devourer's strategic objectives, and the elimination of enemy forces through a combination of direct action and tactical psychological pressure that forced the survivors to withdraw from the system entirely. More significantly, the operation proved that human forces could maintain ethical standards while implementing tactically ruthless strategies. Where the Devourers used civilian suffering as a weapon, humans used civilian protection as a tactical advantage, creating operational momentum that proved impossible for conventional enemy forces to counter. "They're fighting a fundamentally different kind of war," summarized Zach Theory in his final assessment report. "Where traditional military forces must choose between ethical conduct and tactical effectiveness, human forces have developed approaches that make ethical conduct tactically superior." By the conclusion of the first deployment phase, human military effectiveness had exceeded every galactic projection. 3 major Devourer strongholds have been eliminated, civilian casualties have been minimized beyond galactic expectations, and enemy forces throughout the region were showing signs of strategic confusion and declining morale. But the most significant outcome wasn't military, it was cultural. The galaxy had witnessed a form of warfare that combined primitive savagery with sophisticated strategy, individual creativity with unit coordination, and ethical conduct with tactical ruthlessness. Human forces had proven that civilized species could successfully counter uncivilized enemies without abandoning their civilized values. "They're not just special forces," reported Dr. Foster in her final anthropological assessment. "They're a new kind of warrior culture that the galaxy has never seen before. They fight like barbarians when necessary, but they think like philosophers and maintain social bonds that make their barbarity strategically controllable." As the first human military units prepared to return to Earth for debriefing and rest, messages were arriving from across the galaxy. 17 different star systems were requesting immediate human military assistance. The Devourer threat was far from eliminated, but for the first time in 50 years, galactic civilization had reason for hope. Humanity had proven itself not just capable of serving as the galaxy's special forces, but uniquely suited to the role. The question now was whether human society could adapt to being a warrior culture in service of galactic peace, and whether the galaxy was prepared for the long-term implications of having humans as their ultimate military solution. The First War was over. The age of human galactic military service was just beginning. 2 years after first contact, Earth had become something no one had anticipated: the galaxy's most feared and respected military contractor. The transformation wasn't just organizational, it was cultural, economic, and psychological. Humanity had discovered that their species possessed something the galaxy desperately needed, and the implications were reshaping both human society and galactic civilization. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the newly constructed Strategic Operations Center in Geneva, watching real-time tactical displays from 17 different star systems where human forces were currently engaged in active operations. The scale of deployment would have been impossible just months earlier, but Earth's industrial capacity had been revolutionized by galactic technology transfers and the economic incentives of interstellar military contracting. Current active deployments include 42,000 personnel across 19 systems, reported her Chief of Operations, Colonel David Park. Recruitment applications for next quarter exceed available positions by a factor of 7. We're having to turn away volunteers. The numbers told a story that surprised everyone who had been involved in the original contact protocol. Rather than struggling to find suitable candidates for dangerous galactic military service, Earth was experiencing what analysts called warrior overflow. More qualified applicants than the expanding human galactic forces could possibly accommodate. Dr. Amanda Foster, now Director of Cultural Analysis for the Global Military Cooperation Authority, had been studying this phenomenon with growing fascination and concern. We're seeing fundamental changes in human social structures, she reported during the weekly strategic assessment briefing. Career military service has gone from being a specialized profession to being one of the most desired occupations on the planet. The reasons were complex, but understandable. Galactic military service offered not just adventure and challenge, but also technological access, cultural exchange, and financial compensation that exceeded anything available in traditional Earth-based careers. More importantly, it provided something that human psychology seemed to crave: the opportunity to test individual and collective capabilities against ultimate challenges. It's like we've discovered that our entire species has been training for a job that didn't exist until 2 years ago, observed General Marcus Webb during his assessment briefing to the United Nations Security Council. Everything that made humans successful on Earth — adaptability, aggression, social cooperation, tactical creativity — turns out to be exactly what makes us effective galactic special forces. But success was creating unexpected complications. As human military effectiveness became legendary throughout the galaxy, demand for human services was growing beyond Earth's capacity to supply. More problematically, the nature of the request was evolving in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about the human role in galactic civilization. The first major controversy arose when the Centauri Trade Federation requested human assistance with what they termed a commercial dispute resolution in the Alpha Centauri system. When the details became clear, it was obvious that the Federation wanted to hire humans as corporate mercenaries in a conflict that had nothing to do with defending civilization against barbarian threats. They want us to intimidate a competitor species into accepting unfavorable trade terms, explained Dr. Elena Morrison, now serving as Earth's chief diplomatic liaison with the Galactic Council. This isn't about defense or protecting civilians. This is about using our military reputation for a commercial advantage. President Helena Vasquez faced a decision that would define humanity's relationship with galactic civilization: accept the contract and establish Earth as a source of military services for any species willing to pay or refuse, and potentially damage relationships with important galactic allies. The precedent we set here will determine whether we're seen as protectors of galactic peace or just another species selling violence to the highest bidder, she told her cabinet during an emergency session. We need to decide what kind of galactic citizens we want to be. The debate that followed revealed fundamental disagreements about human identity and values that have been masked by the initial focus on defending civilization against external threats. Some argued that Earth should maximize the economic and technological benefits of their military effectiveness, regardless of the specific conflicts involved. Others insisted that human military service should be limited to genuinely defensive operations that aligned with Earth's values. General Webb represented a third perspective that would ultimately shape human galactic policy. We're not just selling military services. We're exporting human values and methods. Every operation we undertake influences how the galaxy understands warfare, conflict resolution, and the relationship between civilization and controlled violence. The decision was to establish what became known as the Earth Doctrine, a set of principles governing human military operations that emphasize protection of civilian populations, defense against genuine threats to galactic stability, and the promotion of conflict resolution methods that preserve civilized values while acknowledging the sometimes necessary reality of organized violence. The Centauri contract was refused, but in a way that demonstrated human diplomatic as well as military sophistication. Rather than simply declining, Earth offered an alternative. Human mediation specialists would assist in resolving the trade dispute through negotiation and conflict resolution techniques developed during Earth's own history of commercial and territorial conflicts. The mediation succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Human specialists, drawing on thousands of years of experience with complex multi-party negotiations, managed to develop a solution that satisfied both the Centauri Trade Federation and their competitors while establishing precedents for peaceful commercial conflict resolution that were subsequently adopted throughout the galactic trade networks. We've discovered that our conflict resolution skills are just as valuable as our combat capabilities, reported Dr. Morrison after the Centauri mediation concluded. The same psychological and social adaptations that make us effective warriors also make us effective peacemakers when circumstances permit. This led to the establishment of Earth's Diplomatic Corps, a parallel organization to the military forces that specialized in conflict prevention, negotiation, and post-conflict stabilization. The Corps drew on the same human characteristics that made the military effective: adaptability, creativity, tolerance for complex social situations, and the ability to function effectively under stress, but applied them to preventing rather than conducting warfare. However, the more significant challenge to human galactic integration was emerging from an unexpected source: success itself. As human military and diplomatic effectiveness became legendary, other galactic species were beginning to develop what xenopsychologists term dependency relationships with human problem-solving capabilities. They're not just requesting our assistance, observed Dr. Foster during a concerning briefing about galactic social trends. They're beginning to assume that any serious problem will eventually require human intervention. We're inadvertently creating a situation where other species are losing confidence in their own problem-solving abilities. The pattern was becoming clear across multiple star systems. Faced with challenges that required creative solutions or tolerance for risk and uncertainty, galactic governments were increasingly defaulting to requests for human assistance rather than developing their own capabilities. Worse, some species were beginning to structure their societies around the assumption that humans would be available to handle any situations that exceeded normal galactic comfort levels. We're becoming the galaxy's problem-solving specialists, General Webb summarized grimly. Not just for military threats, but for anything that requires thinking outside established parameters. The psychological implications were troubling for both sides of the relationship. Galactic species were losing confidence in their own adaptive capabilities, while humans were beginning to develop what anthropologists recognized as superiority complexes based on their apparently unique problem-solving effectiveness. Captain Sarah Chun, recently promoted to admiral after her successes in the Outer Rim campaigns, encountered this dynamic directly during the Proxima Crisis, a situation that would test humanity's maturity as a galactic power. The crisis began when a previously unknown alien artifact was discovered in the Proxima Centauri system. The artifact was clearly artificial, obviously ancient, and potentially dangerous, but also possibly containing technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Traditional galactic protocols for dealing with unknown artifacts involved extensive study, careful planning, and risk minimization strategies that could take decades to implement. Unfortunately, the artifact was showing signs of instability that suggested it might self-destruct within months. The galactic scientific community was paralyzed by the combination of enormous potential benefits and equally enormous risks. As had become typical, they requested human assistance. They want us to take the risks they're not willing to take, Admiral Chun reported to Earth Command after reviewing the situation briefing. But This isn't a military problem. It's a scientific and technological challenge that could affect the entire galaxy's future. The human team assembled for the Proxima investigation reflected the evolution of Earth's galactic role. Along with military specialists and engineers, the mission included anthropologists, psychologists, philosophers, and what were becoming known as risk specialists, humans whose primary qualification was their ability to function effectively in situations where the consequences of error could be catastrophic. Dr. Amanda Foster was part of the team, both as an anthropologist studying the artifact's cultural implications and as a specialist in human galactic cultural relations. This mission is going to define whether we are seen as the galaxy's risk-takers or as a mature species capable of handling challenges that require both courage and wisdom, she observed as the team prepared for deployment. The Proxima artifact investigation lasted 8 months and became a legendary example of human problem-solving methodology. Rather than attempting to minimize risks, the human team systematically identified, analyzed, and managed them while maintaining a pace of investigation that would have been impossible under traditional galactic protocols. The breakthrough came when Dr. Michael Santos, a theoretical physicist whose background included experience with high-energy particle acceleration experiments, recognized that the artifact's instability was actually a form of communication. The ancient technology was attempting to establish contact with any species sophisticated enough to understand that apparent malfunction could be intentional signal. "It's testing us," Santos announced during a team briefing that was simultaneously transmitted to Earth and the Galactic Council. "The instability patterns aren't random. They're a puzzle designed to identify species with sufficient technological sophistication and psychological resilience to interact safely with the technology inside." The solution required a combination of advanced physics, creative problem-solving, and what Admiral Chun termed controlled recklessness, the willingness to take calculated risks based on incomplete information. The team managed to stabilize the artifact and establish communication with its internal systems, discovering technology that would eventually revolutionize galactic energy production and space travel. More importantly, they did so while training galactic specialists in human risk management methodology, ensuring that future similar challenges could be handled by the galactic community without automatic dependence on human intervention. "We're teaching them to be more like us," Dr. Foster observed as the mission concluded. "Not just in terms of risk tolerance, but in terms of adaptive problem-solving under uncertainty." The success of the Proxima investigation marked a turning point in human galactic relations. Rather than being seen as the species that solved problems other civilizations couldn't handle, humans began to be recognized as teachers who could help other species develop their own adaptive capabilities. This led to the establishment of what became known as the Human Development Programs, educational and training initiatives designed to share humans' psychological and social adaptations with other galactic species. The programs were voluntary and carefully designed to respect existing cultural values while providing tools for enhanced adaptability and resilience. "We're not trying to make other species more human," explained Dr. Morrison, now serving as Director of Interspecies Cultural Development. "We're helping them discover their own versions of the psychological flexibility that humans developed through our particular evolutionary history." The programs were remarkably successful, but they also revealed something important about human uniqueness that had implications for Earth's long-term role in galactic civilization. While other species could learn human problem-solving techniques and risk management strategies, they couldn't replicate the fundamental psychological characteristics that made humans naturally suited to extreme challenges. "Our evolutionary history created something genuinely unique," reported Dr. Foster in her comprehensive analysis of human galactic cultural exchange. "We're the only known species that developed intelligence under conditions that required constant adaptation to changing environments, regular tolerance for high-stress situations, and the ability to maintain social cooperation while engaging in organized violence." This realization led to the final evolution of Earth's galactic role. Rather than serving as permanent problem solvers or special forces contractors, humanity became what galactic civilization termed adaptation specialists, the species called upon when situations required approaches that exceeded normal galactic psychological comfort levels, but who also worked to expand those comfort levels through education and cultural exchange. 5 years after first contact, Earth had become the unofficial center of galactic crisis management, conflict resolution, and adaptive technology development. Human-designed training programs were operating in over 300 star systems. Human diplomatic methods had become standard for complex, multi-species negotiations. Human military tactics had revolutionized galactic defense doctrine, while human conflict resolution techniques had reduced the frequency of interspecies warfare to historically low levels. More importantly, humanity had successfully avoided the trap of becoming either galactic overlords or permanent mercenaries. Instead, they had become teachers, consultants, and partners in building a galactic civilization that was more resilient, more adaptable, and more capable of handling the unexpected challenges that an expanding interstellar community inevitably faced. "We've found our place," President Vasquez announced during her address to the United Nations on the 5th anniversary of First Contact. "We're not the galaxy's rulers or its soldiers. We're the species that helps galactic civilization become stronger by becoming more flexible." Behind her words was the recognition that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't their willingness to fight impossible battles or take unacceptable risks. It was their ability to expand the definition of what was possible for civilized beings to accomplish while remaining civilized. The transformation of Earth from an isolated world to the galaxy's center of adaptive innovation had required sacrifices. Human society had been fundamentally altered by the demands of galactic service. Traditional career paths had been disrupted by the attractions of interstellar adventure. Social structures had been strained by the reality that Earth's most capable individuals were frequently away on missions that could last for years. But the benefits extended far beyond the technological and economic advantages of galactic citizenship. Humanity had discovered a sense of purpose that transcended national boundaries, cultural differences, and historical conflicts. They had become united not by conquest or ideology, but by the shared recognition that their species possessed something valuable that could be offered in service of a larger community. "We've become who we were meant to be," Admiral Chun observed as she prepared for her next deployment to a star system, where two species were requesting human mediation for a territorial dispute that had the potential to escalate into the first major interspecies war in galactic history. "We're the species that specializes in solving problems that don't have obvious solutions." Her ship, crewed by humans who had volunteered for a mission that would test every aspect of their adaptive capabilities, departed Earth orbit carrying not just military equipment and diplomatic protocols, but the accumulated wisdom of a species that had learned to thrive in impossible situations by refusing to accept that any situation was truly impossible. The galaxy was learning that when civilized solutions weren't sufficient, human solutions might be. But, more importantly, they were learning that human solutions could help expand the range of what civilized species could accomplish while remaining true to their fundamental values. Humanity had become the galaxy's special forces not because they were the most violent or the most willing to sacrifice ethical principles, but because they had mastered the art of controlled adaptation to extreme challenges. They were special forces not because they fought without limits, but because they had learned to expand the limits of what was possible while maintaining the social bonds and ethical principles that defined them as a civilized species. The age of human innocence was over, but the age of human wisdom in service of galactic civilization had begun. And across the galaxy, other species were learning that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the willingness to adapt, the courage to face the unknown, and the wisdom to know when civilization required its protectors to become something more than civilization had previously imagined possible.